You are watching a Calyx software video tutorial. In this tutorial, we will cover completing the closing disclosure. The closing disclosure screens are used to satisfy the TRID compliance requirements for disclosure of fees. The data on these screens is populated from the corresponding fields and calculations on the closing cost worksheet and truth in lending or TIL screens. The closing disclosure information comprises 5 screens in point, of which most of the fields are read-only and are populated from fields on other screens. Additional information is collected on the Payoffs and Payments screen, which is accessed by clicking the Payoffs and Payments button at the bottom of any of the closing disclosure screens. Also, there will be an addendum page printed when multiple co-borrowers and sellers are on the loan. To complete the closing disclosure, open a borrower file in your Point software. From your navigation panel on the left, select Closing Disclosure. You can also access the closing disclosure from the Forms tab in the top menu. You'll need to either enter or edit the date issued, closing date, and disbursement date fields. Now you should review all data to ensure accuracy and edit as needed. For more information on where the different fields are populated from, you can refer to Knowledge Base Article 0925. In order to see a breakdown of fees, click the Page 2 button on the bottom of the screen. To flag the fees in Section H or Other as optional, you want to use the Closing Costs worksheet to select the appropriate checkboxes for the optional fees. Click the Page 3 button on the bottom of the page. Once Page 3 opens, review the Calculating Cash to Close section. The data from the POC checkboxes, Paid By, Type, and Name fields on this screen are used for UCD XML export purposes only and are not included on the printed closing disclosure. Under the Did This Change column, you will see that for any item that answers yes, the corresponding checkboxes are enabled. Select any that apply to this loan and complete the applicable fields. Complete Section K on the borrower's side of the Summaries of Transaction. You will notice that the Due from Borrower at Closing, Sale Price of Property, and Closing Costs Paid at Closing fields have been calculated and populated already. This is done based on data entered on other screens. Enter the amount that the borrower has paid the seller for personal property purchased in the Sale Price of any personal property included in Sale field. Use the drop-down list here or manually enter additional payments when applies, then enter in the payee name and the amount. Use the adjustment drop-downs to enter any adjustment to the items that are due from the borrower total, if applicable, and enter in the amounts. If the adjustment is paid outside of closing, use the POC checkbox next to the appropriate entries. Fill out the adjustment for items paid by seller in advance by entering the start and end dates and the amounts for the city-town taxes, county taxes, and assessment fees. Select any additional items from the drop-down list, or enter them directly into the field, and enter the start and end dates and the amount for the additional adjustments. For Section L, you will see that the Paid Already By or On Behalf of Borrower at Closing, Deposit, and Loan Amount fields are already populated. These, too, are calculated based on data entered on other screens. Enter the value of any outstanding loans in the Existing Loans Assumed or Taken Subject to field. Just like we did in the previous sections, for any additional payments, either use the drop-down options or manually enter the related type fields and then the amount. Enter other credits using the drop-down and entering the Paid By and Amount fields, then select the POC checkbox if the credit was paid outside of closing. Move on to adjustments doing the same as in other credits. Fill out the adjustments for items unpaid by seller in the same manner as you would for those paid by seller. Back at the top of the Summaries of Transaction section, under the Seller's Transaction column, you can use the Exclude from Printed Form checkbox to omit the seller data from the printed closing disclosure. This is typically used for refinance loans. In Section M, the Due to Seller at Closing and Sale Price of Property fields will be populated based on data entered in other screens, whereas the sale price of any personal property included in sale and adjustments for items paid by seller in advance fields will be populated with data entered in the Borrower's Transaction column. For any additional funds due to the seller, use the drop-down or manually enter the payment in the field, enter the amount, and if the payment was made outside of closing, select the POC checkbox. In Section N, the due from seller at closing and closing costs paid at closing J fields will populate based off data entered on other screens, and the adjustments for items paid by seller fields will populate with the data entered in the borrower's transaction column. Enter the amount of any excess deposit and the value of any outstanding loans in the existing loans assumed or taken subject to fields. Next, enter the amount to pay off the first mortgage in the payoff of first mortgage loan field, and if applicable, do the same for the payoff of second mortgage loan field. Select any additional funds due from the drop-down list, or enter the funds in the field, and then enter the amount. Enter any seller credits using the drop-down list to select your option, or entering the credit directly into the field. Select the type of credit and enter the amount. The amount due from the borrower and due to the seller are calculated and displayed in the calculation section. Now go to page 4 to complete the loan disclosures sections. You will need to select the appropriate checkboxes for assumptions and demand feature, specify the late payment days and charge, and if the loan has a negative amortization, these fields will be enabled, allowing you to select the checkboxes that may apply. You will also need to check the appropriate box in the partial payments and escrow account sections, and then fill out any applicable fields. Next, go to page 5 and complete the Other Disclosures section. Select the Liability and Foreclosure checkbox to indicate that the borrower is protected under state law for liability if foreclosure occurs. If this box is not checked, the statement, "State law does not protect you from liability for the unpaid balance," is printed on the form. Select the Confirm Receipt checkbox to include a signature line on the printed form. If the box is not selected, no signature line would be included. Thank you for watching this Calix software video tutorial on completing the closing disclosure.